it's Tuesday, which means we're going to talk about timing. Now, before we can get into any of the fun stuff, like how do I line this up with music, we still have to look at a few more of the tools, the practical tools within the console that we're going to need to learn, which includes how do I use recipes for timing in my cues, which is what we're going to talk about today. My view I have here set up so we can see what the different components are that we're looking at is I have the recipe editor here so we can see what's happening as we're building it in the programmer, and then I have my sequence here. Now I was doing a little testing, so let's delete Q1 and take a look at how we're going to build this. I'm going to turn on the recipe editor by pressing Edit Recipe in the top right-hand corner, and then I'm going to choose my spots, gridded group, and open. This starts building my recipe line for me. We've talked about this in other videos. So my selection's group 2, my value is on, and now I can start punching in the timing that I want for this cue. So I'm going to want it to delay, so I'm going to add a delay of 0.5. And I could continue manipulating it from here, however, I want to keep this simple as we start out. And this I'm going to store as Q1. Perfect. Now this is Q1, and you can see there's this little orange bar right here on the cue itself. This is just letting me know that delay timing is stored into that cue. If I take a look at the tracking sheet, I'm going to see this orange bar here on every attribute that has delay timing as well. And if I toggle over to the delay layer in the encoder toolbar, it will show me the delay layer of the tracking sheet, and I can see the exact delay that each light has been given by the recipe line. This is what's happening when we add that timing into our recipe line. Now, if I go ahead and hit go on this cue here, I can see that it's delayed on. I use timing all the time when making lots of different cues, but mostly when I'm making like bumps, different wipes that I want to kind of hit with the music, especially stuff that's going to happen over and over and over again. Now, this is just the wipe on. I want to add in the wipe off and kind of see how that goes. So I'm going to create a second cue. I'm going to grab my spots gridded group once again. You can see I never cleared out, so that edit recipe is still on, which is lovely. I like it when it's working for me. And then I can choose release. This is going to create that second or that value that's being added to the recipe line. I'm going to add the exact same delay timing of a 0.5. And then I'm going to go ahead and store this as Q2. So now that this is Q2, I can see they turn on in the first cue. They're going to release in the second cue. I like to use release when I'm making bumps because this is going to happen over another cue stack that might have the lights doing something else. And I just want to go back to whatever that original state was. So I just program in a release for any of these things that are going to be laid on top, whether or not I actually need the release in that moment or not. Okay. Now that I have this, I can take a look at my tracking sheet. I see, hey, it says release. I go to the delay layer. Oh, look, it's the same delay for every attribute. And now we can take a look at how this is going to work together. I want this to automatically follow. So I'm going to set this to follow, and I'm going to set the cue to follow, like the sequence to actually off itself. So that off cue is also going to follow. Now I'm going to clear out the programmer and hit go. And so I see they wipe on and they wipe off. Now, if I want at the moment, that wipe off is happening once the wipe on finishes. If I want it to just kind of continue, this is when I would use a time cue. And then I want this to start before the other cue has actually completed. So this is when I take a look at that duration column to kind of help me determine what I want the trig time to happen in. So I know that this other cue is going to complete after 0.5 seconds. And I want this to complete after, or start after 0.3 seconds of that 0.5. Now when I hit go, I can see that that delay off starts before my delay on has even finished. And if I want that delay on to be even shorter, like I want that almost like the width is what we would describe it in a phaser, I would actually make this trig time smaller. So you'll see as I make this trig time even smaller, that like wipe on is smaller. So that might be what you need, or maybe you're like, no, I need that to be longer. I just want it to barely follow, then I'd set it to 0.4. Or if I want it to complete, I would set it to 0.5, which would be exactly like setting that to be follow cue. Now, what I like especially about this, you might say, okay, well, this took me a lot of time to make. I could have just like activated this in the programmer. Now, yes, these are all true statements, but the truest statement of them all is going to be what happens when your designer comes to you and says, hey, can you update this? Now I have to go find my cue. I have to go activate it in the programmer. yeah, I don't want to do all that. So this is why I love recipes especially. And I know I've said this before, and I know I'm going to say this again, but this is the power of recipes. So I can simply come in here and I can select both of these cues, which is super awesome because this actually puts all the recipe lines for any cues I have selected down here. So I can see like this one's Q1 and this one's Q2. And I can scroll all the way over and I can say, hey, I want that delay to be longer. Set them both to 1 second, maybe leave my trig time where it is and just kind of see what happens. And now it's a slower delay. Maybe the music's a little slower. It needs more of a ramp up. Maybe you're like, now I need it to be faster. I need it to go in the opposite direction. Now I can set that to 0.3. And now it's a super quick wipe on. Maybe I want that width to be even smaller. I'm going to set this to 0.1. So you can see very quickly how once we have the data in here in this kind of recipe format, I can start to kind of manipulate it so it does what my cues are doing. Then maybe I want it symmetrical. So I set my wings to 2. Let's actually go back to this like 0.5 example because I think it really displays like how this is going to work. And we'll leave this set to 0.3. Perfect. So now it's going, oh, I didn't set them both to 2. See, it's why you select both and you make sure both are selected when you're doing something. Duh. Okay. Now they're like both coming in. Maybe I want this kind of like a bounce look, right? So I want it to come in and then back out. This is when I would want the values to be opposite each other. So you'll notice in Q1, we go 0 to 0.5. In Q2, we go 0 to 0.5. But if I want this kind of like bounce look instead of it like being just all moving in together, I'm going to set the second Q to be 0.5 to 0. And now it like comes in and out. It never even touched in the middle because the second cue is starting before the first cue is finishing. So if you actually want it to get that first cue to complete, I'm going to set this to 0.5. And now it bounces in and out. Maybe you don't like the direction it bounces. And it's as simple as saying, you're going to be 0.5 and you're going to be 0. And then you are going to be 0 and you are going to be 0.5. And you can see how quickly I was able to kind of get these really simple, quick looks that can go with hits just by playing with the recipe lines here. The one thing to take note is I can't add recipe lines to the off cue. So this is a common thing that I do when I want it to release and I want delay timing. I'll almost always have 2 cues, one where it turns on, one where it turns off or releases or goes back to whatever I need it to do. And then I just won't put anything in the off cue and I won't give it any timing. I'll just automatically set it to follow so it completes. This is just what recipe lines with timing does for you in a nutshell. And I can't wait to take a look at some music and see how do we get the timing tools that we are learning to move with the music for us. See you next week.